Welcome back to the Build a Web App in 2 hours. This is the Refactor and Debug optional bonus section. So let's just jump right in and do some refactoring and some debugging inside of Service Studio. Let's start with refactoring a few of the things that we missed from the previous section. And that includes, in the Load NASA Image button, down below, when we submit this to the server, it calls the destination, but we probably should warn people. So here there's a confirmation message, and if we go ahead and open a string, we should probably say, are you sure you want to load new images? And this way, they'll be able to decide if they are sure they want the new images or not. So now when we click the button, the confirmation will come up, and when you say yes, then it will submit that, which will be good. We also saw that there was a small problem with the images themselves. So inside the image here, we have a height and a width, but we weren't setting it. And that means that the gallery tries to allocate some space, but it doesn't actually try to force the image to change shape or to change its look. It goes ahead and just dynamically adapts to that, which makes it look strange because each of the images are slightly different sizes. Now, maybe in a professional setting where we want pixel perfect type of stuff, we would actually use an image editor to go ahead and choose the right part of the image or try to create a square image. But in this case, we're just going to warp the image, and regardless of what the size is, we're going to say that the width is 240, because if there are 5 images, that gets us to about 1280 across, which is about the right size for a browser. And then the height, we're going to go ahead and just leave at 200. So for any square images, it distorts them a little, but many of the images are rectangles, and that will go ahead and help those look a little better as well. So we fixed the button and we fixed the images. Now we want to refactor things a little to make them better. So one of the problems that we have here is right now this button calls the load NASA images, and when we open this action, it has all of the cool logic to go ahead and allow the images to be updated. But Neo has already said that, he wants this as a back office management, but he's also going to have a mobile app, and maybe when he's using his mobile app, he might want to submit this type of request as well. At the moment, this is tightly coupled to the web application. So it might be nice if we actually created a separate action that could do this, and then this screen action could call that action. So how might we be able to do that? Well, here in the Planet Screens Load NASA Images screen action, if we just grab Get Planets all the way down to the planet pictures, we can right-click on everything that we just selected and say extract that to an action. And when we extract that to an action, it calls it action 1. It's moved that information into action 1 in the logic tab. So at this point, we can go ahead and call this load NASA images. And if we get rid of the action 1, it now knows that it's going to load NASA images from here. Now something that is interesting that just happened is here in load NASA images, because it knows it needs an image counter and the planet picture, and from where we called it, those variables already exist, it expects them to go back there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the output variables, and then we're going to change the image counter and convert it to a local variable. And we're going to do the same thing by converting planet picture to a local variable, because they're only used right here. And this will allow us to get rid of the output variables and just move the end up to go ahead and shorten this action. So you see that we also got a comment here that says this action was automatically generated from the load NASA images action by using the extract to action accelerator. So we don't need this comment anymore. It's nice that it told us that. We're going to delete that. And we'll go back to the user interface. And here in load NASA images, if we double click on this action, it's calling the other load NASA images because it's not a screen action. We don't need any of the action output. And in this particular case, this doesn't need any of the variables anymore because those are only needed when we're doing the actual work. So if we delete this, now load NASA images says, what are the inputs? So it still thinks that those have inputs. So we can just go ahead and delete these and we're good. So that allowed us to refactor all of the pieces of this image. And now if we wanted to reuse the one that's in the logic area, this load NASA images could be reused when we're actually working in a mobile app. So that's a little bit of the refactoring. One last piece of refactoring that might be interesting is if we actually come back out to our app and we take a look at it, we can see that our Planet Manager needs the charts, and that makes sense because Google Maps needs the charts. And the OutSystems UI Web are all those cool components like the gallery that we've been using and other things. But here it says OutSystems sample data. So we have a dependency on the sample data that originally came from that template that we were using. So let's go back to our module, go back to our data area, and if we minimize the planet picture, we see that that sample database info is here. So if we right click on that, we could manage dependencies and try to remove it. We could open that eSpace and look at that data, but there's also a new cool option, which is just remove unused dependency. So we're not using this because we removed all of the sample data. So if we remove it, it disappears. And it says 2 dependencies were removed because the sample products and the categories were not actually being used. So let's close that. And now we've kind of cleaned up everything so that our app is tight and it's very nice and clean, which is great. And let's just walk through debugging this. So if we want to go ahead and call the load NASA images this time, let's right click on the action. And in this case, let's add a breakpoint. So when we get to the planet screen and it attempts to call load NASA images, it's going to get to a breakpoint here where we'll be able to work with it. Now, there were some changes that we made to the app, so we should go ahead and publish that. And the one-click publish is going to, again, send all of our changes up to the server. So we'll come back and we'll focus on the planet and our load NASA images. And once we get this all published to the server, there we go, we can go back to the debugger. And by default, the debugger is not turned on. So we will go ahead and say start debugging. And at the moment, it's not doing anything. It doesn't show us any of the variables in use or anything else because there are no active requests coming to the server. So if we make a request to the browser, and in this particular case, our breakpoint is around the planets. So if we go to the planets area, we can see now that all the cards are square, and we're able to see the 2 rows of the different images that we have, and we can move back and forth. And then if we come back, we have the Load NASA Image button. If things work, when we click on this, we get a confirmation. Are you sure you want to go ahead and load the new images? And we'll say OK. And now you can see that it's calling us over to Service Studio, because our red breakpoint now has a blue arrow next to it. And it's saying that we've actually gotten to the main flow to planets, and because we called this screen action from the button, this is where we currently are. So this was the request that started this, and this is how far the debugger has got to actually trying to load the NASA images. Down below, we can control the debugger, and we have things like step over, which would just jump over this, or step into, which will actually take us into load NASA images. So we're going to step into this. And here, we're actually in the Load NASA Images from the logic area. And if we step over, we get to look for our planets. If we step over that, we now see that it got the planets, and it brought back a list of planets. And the current planet has a planet picture and a planet, and this planet is Antilor. So we're actually watching the information flow through the debugger. We could go ahead and step over the get planets, and now we go into the list. It calls the NASA server. It brings back a new picture, so there's the binary data. It's a JPEG, and if we keep going, it stores it inside of the database, and then it starts the loop over again. And I could keep going through all of these because we actually have 20 planets that we could go through. But we can also just allow the debugger to keep running and continue. And when it does that, you see all the information disappears. So there are no more requests. And now, if I actually just minimize Service Studio, when I go back, you can see that the planets and the page has refreshed. Now, in this particular case, I can't see any significant difference here. But one of the things that I could do, well, we do see a little difference. We see 2 of these Antilors. And the reason for that difference, if we go back to Service Studio, is that if we actually look at our image counter, we didn't give it a default value of 1. So it started with 0, and when it started with 0, it came back with that same image twice at the beginning for some reason. So something else we can try is give it a default value of 5, and let's publish again real quickly. And while it's publishing, we'll go back in to the interface to load NASA images, and we'll go ahead and remove the breakpoint here. So we don't need to walk through the debugger again. And it is helpful to remember that the debugger is turned on, so we can actually just turn it off. And we'll go back to the browser. And for one last hurrah, we'll go ahead and look at our planets. And this time we're going to load the NASA images. And because of the change in the default, it's actually going to move us to a different part of the array. So the planet images should change a bit. So if we go ahead and click OK, we do get a new set of images, and we can see that they've changed a little bit, and we'll probably get some new images we haven't seen before down here at the bottom. So we are getting real images from NASA, and everything is working. So that's it for building a web app in 2 hours. Hopefully you've enjoyed working with all of the pieces. Join me in the next section where we'll do a quick review of what we've done during this whole session, and we'll kind of wrap things up and think about steps we can take to go from there.